Hello, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Guzman, and this podcast we're shooting today is the third one in our Let's Talk About series, where we try to break the stigma surrounding mental health by talking about it. And this third episode is focused on being sober from alcohol and/or substances and the mental health journey that accompanies sobriety. Myself and today's guests are both on our own journeys of sobriety. Um, I actually met Kelly, who is today's guest at Claremont Graduate University, which is where we're both students. And she invited me to my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting earlier this year. And so we'll talk more about our friendship and our connection and how we encourage one another and how AA has been influential in our lives throughout this podcast today. But we hope to share pieces of our stories with you all and to give you some resources that we utilize to stay sober. So to begin, we'll introduce ourselves, and I'll start by introducing myself, and then Kelly, I'll have you introduce yourself. So again, my name is Jocelyn Guzman, and I want to say I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is October 10th, 2021, which means that I just celebrated 6 months about a couple weeks ago, which is really exciting to me to reach half a year. As I said, I'm a student at Claremont Graduate University, and I'm getting my master's degree in community engaged education and social change. And so this podcast series is actually part of my final project for that degree, because I really believe community is the way to reach people and educate and just push forward in life and persist. So I'm 3 weeks away from graduation. I'm really excited about that. And I'm currently living in Modesto, California at my family's house. And I'm just really excited to see what happens after graduation and where my life takes me. But that's enough about me. So Kelly, if you could just introduce yourself, say your name, when your sobriety date is, where you currently live, and just any other information you want us to know.
Okay, great. I too am in the Community Engaged Education and Social Change Master's Program. I will graduate next year at the end of the summer term because there's a class I want to take. And my sobriety date is August 3rd, 2004. And my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous has been long and windy. And I feel so grateful to be sitting here with you today. I always love community is so important. And I was really drawn to this major. And what I think is so interesting is when I'm vulnerable in a group. And what I loved about Claremont Graduate University and the Claremont colleges is how intimate the classes are, how small they are, and the not just the freedom, but, I feel safe enough to, at, whenever juncture is appropriate to mention my sobriety, just in case someone wants to talk about sobriety with me. And that was you, and you were so excited. And I love that when I said, hey, I think this women's meeting full of young women and young moms and students, that you would really enjoy it and that you came and that it worked for you. I've enjoyed Zoom, but I am an in-person meeting kind of girl. I love the coffee. I love the chit chat. I love, who's on who at the 502, certain things like that. There's a lot of kind of drama that goes on and a lot of times in clubs. And I also like my more serious women's meetings where we're studying the literature. I think that a balance is really important. So I think that kind of is a little in a nutshell. Yeah. August 3rd, it was really hot. And I still always revel at the fact that I could get sober in the summertime. I don't know. I think the same thing about holidays and how, I love too that your sobriety date is October 10th. I have a dear friend named Tina that is also October 10th. So I think that's
no way
special. And she's the one that I want you to go. She's up in Hollister.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So we're definitely going to have.
Yes. And so I'm just so happy that you invited me to Alcoholics Anonymous, and that, I was nervous to share about my own sobriety with the class, because whenever I was envisioning this project, I was telling the class that I wanted to do a podcast about alcohol addiction and substance addiction. And I know some people in the class were a little more surprised by that. And then you were just so welcoming. You're like, okay, let's do it. That sounds great. So, yeah, we'll talk about our sobriety journeys. And I know you said you love AA and how the community there, but can you tell us about like when it all began? Like what was that like? And how did you get into AA?
Oh, yes. So I think it's interesting how alcoholism in my generation, I think it was discovered that it was genetic. My parents were partiers. They were alcoholics. They're both Bass. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I think that they were, but they didn't ever have to get sober. No one in my family ever went to Alcoholics Anonymous, but I did have friends, of course. And, I was always involved in drinking and drugs but just kind of always seemed to pull it off. I was in a diversion program that started in junior high, because was going down the wrong path, and I got scooped up by the police department and through school, because I had a lot of influence in my school that kind of overshadowed some of the authority figures that they got my parents involved. And so that kind of started my journey on managing and controlling my drinking and behavior and using. And so it's been going on a long time. Uh, even like what I know about alcoholism, that I have an obsession of the mind, that I can't stop thinking about drinking. I can't stop thinking about when I'm going to be drinking. I can't stop thinking about, like, for example, I'm not going to have dinner at so-and-so's house because they never have enough alcohol. We'll just invite them over to our house. I mean, that was how it kind of expanded as I was like a married woman. But when I was younger, everyone wanted to come to my house because we had a closet full of booze because my dad had owned a bar. So
Oh,
that's all the way. I mean, I was the kid that you went to her house to spend the night, and it was going to be fun. And it was going to be fun. It was going to be an adventure. The boys were going to be there because my parents went out of town a lot. My dad worked at the bar. My mom was a flight attendant too when I was younger. And anyway, so a lot of freedom, and it was a lot of fun. I did have a lot of good experiences. I also experienced sexual violence throughout the years, and no one ever talked about it. It was definitely, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. What were you wearing? You said yes to
how
go with
much
that
did you have to
person.
drink?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And so those things went on too. And I know that you have a support group, and I've seen the work that's being done on the campuses, and I think it's amazing, because knowing that it's not your fault, I feel like um, it just really lessens the burden of where it sits inside our soul. It really can allow us to heal. Do you find that too?
Yes, definitely. And that's why like we did another podcast about sexual assault and like talking about it and, just destigmatizing like even the fact that you can't talk about it. Like it's important to talk about and to, say like, for my assault, alcohol was involved. And like a big thing is like, blaming myself, thinking like, oh, if I just didn't drink, then none of this would have happened. But it's like it's on the other person. It's on the other
Yeah.
person not to sexually assault you. And so yeah, I find that to be the case. And I think like for me, my journey with alcohol, as you're saying, has some, connection to sexual assault as well. And just like, I think that that's a large part of the reason that I wanted to stop drinking. And
Mm.
so what was the reason that you kind of wanted to? You said you're having fun. Like I know there's some, sexual assaults and things, but what made you like say like now's the time to stop?
Oh gosh. So the end of my drinking, I was 31. I was married. I had 3 kids. I never wanted to be married. I did not want to have children because I did not want to have the same. I understood that, you always become your mother. That whole idea that, you always turn out to be just like your mother. So the only way for me to avoid this, like, kind of really dysfunctional, abusive lineage from my grandmother to my mother, my mother to me, was to not have children. And plus, was like, it's hard. I knew it was
Yeah.
hard. My mom never ever missed an opportunity to make sure that everybody knew how hard it was to be a mother. So here I am, 31. The reason that I became a mother was because I got fired from my job again. And my mother said, I'm really tired of this. Like, you're 25 years old. You need to get your life together. And my husband was a good man. Like, he was way better than a lot of the other ones. Let's just say that. And And, he could work and he had a college degree and he was from a pretty stable home. His parents were immigrants from Norway. And, he was just a good guy. And he had a son who I already loved. He was 2 years old when I met my husband. So I got married and right away had a baby, had Courtney, who you met earlier. And then a couple of years later, I had Kari, which was like, oh God, no. And then, we had we had all the things and I was trapped. Like I'm trapped inside and then I'm trapped inside and then I'm trapped inside, which I think is not just alcoholics freak out about being trapped, but for sure, like having alcoholism, my coping skills for being trapped, my escape plan is always harmful to everyone around me that rely on me and love me. So I'm super fun. Like if you're my friend, you love
I know
that I
that.
drink. You love it's so fun. Nobody wants me to stop. My best friend won't drink with me anymore. My husband is literally like, just like a wet cat all the time. And my mom and everyone and his whole family and everyone's turned on me and I can't stop doing the things I'm doing, even when I don't want to do them. And then I'm ready for a psychiatric evaluation to where I need to be locked away somewhere so that I'm not hurting the people that love me, because I cannot bear the look on their face when I've done it again. And I lie to myself. I drink behind my own back. I have these elaborate plans. I really need to get my crap together because I've gotten it together over the years. I can clean up, I can get a job, I can, get a license. I got my real estate license. I've always been able to work. I had a successful billing service that I did, that I gave up, of course, behind an unmanageable relationship and my drinking. So I just couldn't do it another day. And I had the phone number of someone that I knew really well that was going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I called her and I asked her to take me to a meeting because I knew I wasn't going to drink that day because I was sick. I mean, I was really in bad shape. But I knew I would drink again as soon as I felt better, no matter how many promises I made to myself and to anyone else who loved me. And so I went to a meeting and it was like, oh, these are my people. Even if I didn't understand really what they were saying, I just,
Yeah.
I felt safe. I felt better when I left.
Awesome.
Undeniable, right? And was that your experience? I mean, I know it's different for us because you zoomed in and
Yeah.
I was in the meeting, but was it your experience too, or?
Yeah, so I'm glad that your journey started right away with Alcoholics Anonymous. I think that that's a firm foundation to step on. Like your first day of sobriety, you said, I'm going to go and use a resource and be with community. For myself, I started my sobriety journey alone. So for my first, I think 3-4 months, maybe even 5 months, I just did it on my own. And so whenever you invited me to a meeting, I felt like the same thing. I was like, it's so nice to know that other people understand what you're going through. And, everyone has different stories and different paths that led them to their own sobriety. But what was great is just everyone was so vulnerable and welcoming and willing to talk about it and support each other through it. So that's what I loved. And it was on Zoom, but because I started on Zoom, I didn't know otherwise. Like I didn't know what an in-person meeting was because all I had was my women's group you invited me to online, and they're awesome. The community's awesome. Just everything about it was just so well done. And like the community there is just, they're all such great women. And so it felt welcoming. Oh, and then I wanted to point out too, the 16 mug Kelly's drinking from marks her 16 years of sobriety. So just wanted to point that out. You told me before we started the podcast. But yeah, so for me, that is what it was like. And since you're asking a little bit about my sobriety journey, it's kind of similar in the terms of like having some mental health struggles and then that leading to like wanting sobriety. For myself, back in October of last year, I talk about this in the first podcast about bipolar disorder, but I had a full-on breakdown. I was awake for basically a month straight, not eating, not sleeping. And whenever that happens to your mind, it's bad. And, during this time, I don't remember if I was drinking or not. I think my sobriety actually started in September, not October. But because I had this whole month period where I'm not 100% sure, it's just easier to say my sobriety date is the day I remember. But I had this mental health breakdown, and I started going to treatment, and I started seeing a psychiatrist, and I got prescribed antipsychotic medication and antidepressants. And I wanted to make sure that I was seeing how the medications affected me. I didn't want to be drinking and thinking I'm feeling better because I'm numbing all the pain, but then, and the medication's actually not working, or whatever. So that's kind of what was my impetus for like starting my sobriety. But like the more I reflect on why I became sober and like how that started, it started actually like a year before that, because I walked into my sexual assault counselor, and I was like, I really want to drink. And she had done some work with AA, and she told me, play the tape all the way through. And I know that this is like an AA expression. And she's like, okay, so you're having the fun, you're drinking, you're numbing the pain. But then what happens after that? Like, you're hungover, you're sick, you made decisions that you regret. And so she told me that a year prior to me getting sober. And she told me you should go to an AA meeting a year prior to me being sober. And I was doing it on my own. Like I limited my drinking. Like during the holidays, I decided I'm not going to drink this holiday season. But I just, again, never had that community, that support until AA. So yeah, thank
Right.
you again for inviting me to that. And would you say AA is the biggest resource that you've utilized?
I do want to say, like, just thinking about like how you said it started a year before. So I too had every resource available to me. I, have a lot of privilege. My husband had insurance, I had a supportive family, and I could not get sober until I went to AA.
Oh
I
yeah.
tried all the resources and I could not get sober until I came to AA, whatever that thing is. And I don't know, like serendipity. I don't know if I was finally willing enough. I don't know if like, that whole thing of like, I hope you're, surrendered enough to want this thing for yourself. But I had gone to a meeting a year before with a coworker, and it, was like, I thought I was an alcoholic because my parents were. But I didn't know what it meant really. You know what I'm saying? So it did, so like, I really think it's important to note that for me, privilege didn't matter. I could not get sober until I came and just said, oh my God, please help me. And I had help resources. I was seeing a therapist. Who specialized in addiction and all kinds of mental health issues for a year. And that person suggested I go to see if I was a good candidate for an outpatient program. And they said, oh, yes. So I did do it, but I went to AA first. And then I utilized this 9-month outpatient program. So in addition to AA, I was being accountable at a 9-month program. And I'm not sure if my motivation was like getting a degree or a certificate. I don't know what my insurance was going to cover it. So I went. How is it going to hurt? I asked my sponsor, and she said, yeah, I mean, and I made some great friends, and I learned some things like we had accountability. We had like relapse prevention classes. We had different groups. So I got
And this
both
is all at
sides
the outpatient treatment. This
at
is
the
all
outpatient. Yes, at the outpatient treatment. So it was a couple hours a day, 5 days a week. And then you went down, I think, to 3 days a week. And, I had such a bond there and then I have some friends still to this day that I met there. So, and I'm glad. And we had to go to outside meetings too, which was no problem for me. I like the meetings. I like speaker meetings. I like participation meetings. I like women's meetings. I like literature focused meetings. I like them all.
Yes. And so you started Alcoholics Anonymous, then went to this outpatient treatment center. Do
Mm-hmm.
you think like those two resources together like amplified your success?
I do. I mean, I can only say that I had accountability with my treatment with the outpatient because they were doing random testing. So I also had that little, niche. And then, like I said, we did relapse prevention groups, I think every Friday. And, I had a couple things like I had a friend who was turning 30 and I was all worried about missing her party because it was going to be at a bar. And I told them and we had a whole class about it. So I do think that that it did help with my success. Plus it filled my days.
Yeah.
It filled my days. Like I was busy. I was too busy. but I was still working so my dad owned a restaurant and I was still working there and
Okay.
pouring my own drinks. Like you're your own bartender. So, that was a whole other thing. And, I would get off work sometimes at like 9, 10 o'clock. And on Friday and Saturday night, there was an NA meeting on my way home that was candlelight. And they were really welcoming to me. I didn't identify as an addict, but it wasn't because I'm not one. I just, you know, alcohol is my primary. And that's but anyway, they were really wonderful because sometimes I had to go because I wanted a drink after work.
Yeah. And you have it so easily available to you as well.
Your shift drink. You just sit down and you do. I mean, some things are so routine that sitting down to count my money and do my side work without a drink was like, I couldn't even count the money. And it's funny because you can think of being completely drunk and not having any problems counting the money, and then being so sober that you can't count it.
Yeah.
So yeah. And cooking was like that for me too. Like I made dinner every night or mostly every night. And I couldn't get my timing down for almost a year. Everything just like either just went in the oven, it was like pre-made or picked up or yeah. Cause I would be in the kitchen and there's just like these ideas about like, it's acceptable to be drinking wine when you're in the kitchen. So if I'm in the kitchen from, 4 o'clock until dinner, it's okay to start drinking then.
Yeah. I think that was definitely a thing for me. So you're saying that you had these routines that you would do while you were drinking. And one routine I did, which is actually documented on my Instagram, is called Drunk Q&A. And this was like a thing I started where I was working. I actually never drank at work. I would get high, off some like weed during the end of my shift because I was a dishwasher. And so I would just like take a gummy and then just for like 4 hours straight do dishes. And so I understand what you're saying, where it's like all of these tasks that you come to associate with like needing to be under some influence. Like in order to do dishes, like I thought like I need to get high and like just to do it. But I never drank at work. But as soon as I got home from work on my weekends, I was working 2 jobs at 2 different restaurants, and restaurant work is hard. And so whenever I would get home from, work, I'd go on Instagram and I'd be like, time for drunk Q&A. And I would like start drinking, pour some vodka. That was my drink of choice. And I would just, let people ask me questions via like a submitting questions button. And then I would drink and I'd be like, okay, now I'm drunk. Let me answer these questions. And this was a series that went on for like a long time. I have over probably like 70 questions answered that I just answered under the influence of alcohol, and people loved this session. And like, so I understand what you're saying in terms of like, you get used to it and you develop routines, and then it makes it hard to break those routines.
And it sounds like it was an outlet for you too.
Yeah.
Right. It's like an outlet, it's like I sit down, I have my drink, we chit chat, we do this, we do that. And then, it's like an outlet. It's the end of the shift outlet. Like you go home and this is what you do when you go home. It's the same at the end. It's like this idea of the end of the day, and I was raised that way too. Like if people came over, like when my parents came home from work, they had a drink.
Yeah.
So it's funny, the 20 questions for AA. Have you seen it?
I have not.
Oh, okay. It's on we should put all the resources in for the podcast, and your links is aa.org has all the pamphlets. And we have a pamphlet called 20 questions, and it asks a series of questions, and it says, you might be an alcoholic. And you know what I love about Alcoholics Anonymous? No one's in charge. No one's going to tell me what to do. Suggestions are made. And then I ask a question and someone tells me what to do, but I don't just sit there and then get lectured at. That doesn't happen. And there's no requirement except a desire to stop drinking. I love the traditions. But one of the questions in the 20 questions is, do you ever drink alone? And I'm like, well, only if no one's over. I don't even understand the question. I mean, just really. And I have a friend who's not an alcoholic, but she loves to drink. And she's like, I never have drank alone in my life. It would never occur to me to drink alone. Well, she's not an alcoholic, and like, so she doesn't have any of that. Like what we just don't see it through the same lens at all. And we just crack up, but she does like to party, but she's, there's a difference. There are people that like to party. We have heavy drinkers. And then there's something I think that's different about me that is alcoholism. And it's super important to be sitting down and reading the literature and understanding we have the doctor's opinion in our book that really describes the difference between, a heavy drinker and an alcoholic. Because, if you're an alcoholic, it helps to surrender a little bit more to this way of life, and knowing that, abstinence really is because I can't have one drink. That
I
sets
can't
off a
either.
craving. Yeah.
If I'm drinking, I have to get like blackout drunk. Like that has to be the goal. And I am amazed by people who can just have like one beer and just be fine and like go on with their day and move on and not want to drink to get drunk.
And they
That's
don't like
something.
how it feels.
Yeah, I know.
Or in the morning, like as you get older, you'll see that you have friends that were heavy drinkers that are now, and you're like, maybe, but in their late 30s, they have families, their kids get up early. They don't want to feel bad in the morning. So they just don't drink, or they only have one, maybe two.
Exactly. And you mentioned earlier about the genetic aspect of it, and my grandfather was an alcoholic.
Mm.
And so, and I saw that growing up too. And I think that's something odd as well, is like when you see someone who, has this disease, and he was, an old man, and he, during some of his life, whenever he was struggling with his alcoholism, he'd be unhealthy in a wheelchair, willing himself to the liquor store against our, desires. And I would see this, but then you would think as a kid seeing this, that would make me not want to drink, but it didn't make me not want to drink. I was like, oh, that looks good to him, like it must be good. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's definitely some genetic aspect of it too, that
Well,
that
and
does
and
play a
the
role.
thinking, right? The thinking and the process. And even your grandfather, and then your parent that was the child of your grandfather, they probably had a lot of things that they did to not become alcoholics. But all of that, to me, like, no one gets away from it.
Yeah.
When there's alcoholism, it gets on everyone. Like, my kids all have their, neurosis, even though that's related to, alcoholism. Like, they could go to an Al-Anon meeting any day and identify with, the thinking. And because, like, in my experience, when I got sober, I had 3 kids, I was married, my husband was really supportive, but, my parents were like, oh, it's a little rash, but everybody was so glad that it wasn't just, everyday triage, like trying to figure out what we're going to do about Kelly. And, but my husband and I were separated. And so that is really how, I thought for sure he was my problem, for sure. If I could have weekends off, and he had to take care of the kids, because my husband was really selfish. He worked all week, he's so influenced by the patriarchy. Like, he thought I was going to do second shift. And I'm like, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
We're going to split the job. No, thank you. And it's like, well, what'd you do all week? Well, I did the house. Took care of the house. It's a lot of work. And which is just something that, that's a whole other podcast, but we were separated, and I thought 6 days, 6 weeks, I was done. I was like, it's me. Oh my God. Like, it's
Hit you.
worse.
Yeah.
I for sure thought. And, so really, coming in and then working the program, which, knowing, understanding, fully conceding to my innermost self, knowing that I need to be restored to sanity, learning how to turn it over, which that was like, I was asking everyone, what do you mean turn it over? Like, that was a really hard one. Step 3 was not hard once I understood it, but, I'm just a willful, strong person that gets things done. So surrender is of all the things, was challenging. And, doing an inventory, like writing down all my resentments, I was like, oh, no problem. I had a lot of people to write down. I had, like, not a lot of people, but, the same suspects over and over. And anyway, and then looking at, like, where am I in all this? And, like, I want to know what my triggers are, because I know I'll drink at people. I drink at people. Like, if you do something to me, especially my husband, if you betray me, or you hurt me, or I think you've hurt me, I will drink at you and punish you. And because I have to drink to say all those mean things. You know what I'm saying? So on, and then I make amends. So I go through the steps. and I have some reconciliation with my husband, and I have this great Halloween with him and a couple holidays, and he died suddenly after a simple surgery when I was sober 9 months. He was in a coma for 31 days and I had to terminate his life. And so I had three
So
kids,
sorry.
and and we were all just devastated. And my in-laws actually took our son, his son, from me and the girls. And it was devastating. And I was sober in a community full of people like you learned when you came, remarkable, resourceful, smart, really smart, loving, caring people, women that would make meals in individual, like spaghetti dinners, lasagna, knives, forks, everything, like in a pick, like it was like I picked the food up from a restaurant, from someone's kitchen, and cake, and just the most incredibly generous group of people I've ever known that carried me through that. And I buried my husband. I was just turned 32. My kids were 3, 5, and 9. And it just was a series. I mean, I have had a series of unfortunate events since then, um, that the fact that I've stayed sober can only be attributed to the love that I've received, the community that I've built, um, and my higher power sending literal angels into my life on a regular basis, to where I just can't give up one day at a time, because I'm not cured of alcoholism. I want to drink when I am in pain. When my heart is hurting, I want to drink. It makes me feel better right away. And I've learned over the years, if I don't drink and I do something else, I can stay sober and the solution will present itself. But if I drink, all those, whatever the original problem was, will be completely minusculed by all the disasters that I've created from drinking.
And so you've been through so much during your sobriety, and like, what was the most difficult part for you about your sobriety?
So, when my husband died, I, you know, I told you I didn't want to, I wasn't a kid growing up wanting to have a family, because so I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I had to raise these kids. And so my mom really helped me, and our relationship was chaotic. I mean, we of course loved each other so much, and she was so wonderful. And then she died, literally just died in the middle of the night. She was 62 years old, not sick, nothing, just had a cardiac episode that ended and at the end of her life. And I had just had another baby. After my husband died, I hooked up with the guy who helped me move, tall, dark, and handsome. And 6 weeks later, I'm knocked up, and and then the chaos ensued, and that ended in restraining orders. The last time I saw him, he didn't knowingly do it, but he had his hand over my mouth and nose, and he was smothering me, and the police had to come, and my kids were taken. And so that all happened. My mom died, like, all, and I just really couldn't figure out a reason to get up every day. And because I'm just like, I'm a walking disaster. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, I should drink. When I'm drinking, my life isn't this unmanageable. And so I came into Alcoholics Anonymous with a lot of like really toxic thinking about relationships, a lot of chaotic experiences, totally broken heart. Because when my husband died, we had been through a terrible time, and my drinking made it so that his family did not like me. And that's being very generous. Like, they hated me, and so did his friends. And I was kind of a leper in our community. And so it was hard to stay sober, because I felt bad already. And then, so I had to really work through that. And I had to access some mental health resources. DCFS made it mandatory for me to go to domestic violence support groups and parenting classes, and I did. And I've always had a sponsor. I have always had a community of people, even just one or two, that I could really tell the truth to, even when I couldn't really tell my sponsor. And that's what I would say is like leaning into the love, leaning into the light, and, knowing those dark thoughts, they're there. And I have to just tell the truth about them. Yeah. So that's definitely, if I was going to give any advice to anyone that's coming into the program and, they're not really sure, like life is lifing along, like, these life and death matters. We're going to probably, I mean, if it says, if all the things in all the religious traditions are true, that, life unfolds exactly as it should in God's world, nothing by mistake, nothing gets left out, then my husband and my mom were going to die anyway, whether I was sober or not. And it isn't that they died, because I'm not like, I believe they're in a better place, whatever that is. Like their souls have returned to the source of all things good, and they're at peace and they're not upset with me. I believe all those things. And I believe that they're working for our good. They always show me signs, but I want them here. Like I want somebody to help me with the laundry.
Yeah.
I want somebody to take the kids to school one day, like those practical things that have been really hard. I want to hug. I want to feel it. Like, I want you to sit with me and, pet my hair and tell me that I'm doing a good job and I'm a good mom. So I've had to really, lean into my girlfriends that I've met in AA. So I would say that my advice is to lean into that love, and to form those friendships, because the most remarkable people I've ever met are definitely in Alcoholics Anonymous.
That's awesome. And I'm glad that you had that love to lean into during these difficult times. And like, even for myself, like yesterday or 2 days ago, I texted you because my boyfriend broke up with me. And not that like my initial first thought was like, I need to get drunk, but I texted you because I was like, don't let me drink. Like, I know I'm going to be hurting. Not that I want to drink right now, but just like, don't let me drink. And to be able to reach out to you specifically, and someone who knows the struggle, especially, you're describing relationships and heartbreak and death and grief, and to reach out to someone who knows those things and has stayed sober despite them, was like, I need to text her right now. And so I texted you literally while in the car, freshly broken up with. And I leaned into that love. And I think that that's what I did, in the last couple of days. I've leaned into love and community. And my community is, not as strong in AA yet, because I'm still new. I'm still building that AA community, but I have a very strong community of support otherwise. And I just lean into them all the time for support. And it's hard because, some of those people in the community, their solution is like, let's get drunk. So I think it'll be good to have like AA community to lean on. But even whenever someone says like, let's get drunk, I appreciate where they're coming from,
Yes.
they're trying to help.
Yes. It's none of my business. People's drinking is none of my business. Absolutely not. And that can be really challenging. I did have some problems with my girlfriends when I first got sober, because they stopped inviting me to things because I don't drink, and they were going to be drinking. And I had to say, it really hurts me that you're not including me. Like, I'm not going to drink. And it took a little while, or I would say, I want to come and I'll bring, a sober friend, or like I'll meet up, like I would talk to one of the other friends in the group and say, you're my accountability person, like no drinking for me. And like, and I would talk to my sponsor about it. And, she would say, you can go anywhere when you're spiritually fit. But if I'm having another crisis, for example, if I'm invited to a party and something happens and I'm in a really dark place, I just don't get to go. I have to politely decline. And that's me being honest with myself, kind of like doing that evaluation that you were talking about, where like, I don't want to drink right now, but I need to make sure that somebody knows where I'm at. And that to me has helped me, because when I'm being honest with myself, I know that I can make better choices and that, are sustainable. Because those short term, but like I buy stuff and then I have to return it. I do things. I'm like, I'm going for ice cream, but I don't eat in the middle of the night. I try not to do anything like, like really like toxic, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But, I think I've gone around the gamut, the relationship things, which finally, that all has been removed for me, all that kind of chaos. I've done a lot of work, but what I do know is I have to stay sober to know that to have that awareness, because I know that when I'm drinking, I am full flight from reality. That is me. I am so far away from what's real and what's true. And you know what else I did was, after I was so devastated, after my husband and my mom and social workers and all this chaos that I had brought, and I got this little job and it was really fun, and then it became a problem because my daughter, my youngest daughter, Savannah, is disabled. She's diagnosed quadriplegia, cerebral palsy. She had a brain injury at birth. She was 10 weeks later, I'm having a baby, chaos ended in domestic violence. So she's my little angel. Actually, she's my soulmate. And she's the one. And she's 14 now. But anyway, oh gosh, where was I going with that?
I don't know exactly where you were going with that, but you were talking about having accountability through difficult times.
Yeah. So all this stuff with her, and like she's on life support. She ended up with a feeding tube. She's, nonverbal, not meeting any markers, going to therapy and doing all these things. And so I had this little job finally. And then because of her Social Security, it became complicated. Like no one has insurance because I was making like $85 too much. And this is before the Affordable Care Act and the Obamacare. And so my sponsor suggested, because now what I thought I needed to do was marry a longshoreman because they have the best insurance and she needed good insurance. And so, she said, why don't you take a class, get your own insurance? So I took a class at Harbor College and I had just quit smoking. So that was another thing. I really needed to stay busy. Yeah. It's been almost 10 years. In August, it'll be 10 years. Yes, this is my 10th year of college. And I took some classes and I thought, oh my gosh, this is great. And it's so rewarding. It's like you do this and then you get this and you get here's your grade and here's your assignments. And I'd love to learn. And so I went to Harbor College and then I looked for a program for my daughter, the best education program or whatever kind of program. I had checked a couple of communities. I thought I was going to go to Irvine because I saw the Dalai Lama there. And what a gorgeous campus. Oh my gosh. Have you ever been there? Did you
I've never.
UCI? Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. So, and then we do know some people because we were in Orange County for a time, but then I went and looked at the conductability program in Pitzer and I literally Googled colleges in Claremont and I picked the one with the tree, which is Pitzer College. And I went on a tour and I applied as a new resources student and got in. And I mean, I had no idea what kind of a journey I was embarking on, but there isn't a better school made for me. Like I am a social justice advocate. I was born like that. So all their mission statements, and they are aligned with it. And so am I. So it was a really wonderful experience. And then I graduated in May and I had already applied for the community engaged education, social change master's, because that was, Tessa Hicks Peterson. She created that master's because she's a social justice advocate too. And they have a CASA program. So anyway, it's just been so fulfilling my life because, there's so many things that have been challenging and not that, being educated and taking all these classes and all these papers and the research hasn't been daunting and challenging, but it's been wonderful.
Yeah. And it seems like it has helped you with your sobriety too. Like it seems like having, the ability to be your own person and learn and grow and take classes and all these things like helped you through.
These are the things that belong to me. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a mom, I have 4 kids. My son is grown, I've raised my kids in AA and, but it's really hard, challenging work. So this little piece is for me. Plus I'm being, a good role model. Not that none of my kids go to college, which is all so funny. And they're all college age. I mean, my youngest, daughter from my husband, Kari, she's 19. She took a gap year and she'll be starting at community college, but none of my kids have any like desire um, to hurt themselves for some status that doesn't actually mean anything. So, they really grew up in a house with a lot of conversation. Like, I'm an alcoholic. I graduated from college, in May.
Yeah.
I was 46 years old. I'm like, do whatever you want.
Congratulations.
Right?
Yes.
Do what I tell my kids, live your best life,
Yes.
whatever it looks like. So college, but it's been so meaningful for me.
Yeah.
And I've made a lot of friends in along the way. I have about maybe 15 friends that are just from school that I stay in touch with that have become really good friends that will be forever friends.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like, you're a pro at building community.
Pretty
like
good.
Wherever you go, you're like, Alcoholics Anonymous, build community, school, build community.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what I wanted to do this project about too, because, with everything that I've faced over the last year specifically, and just, broadly my whole life, like what has got me through it has been my community, has been the people that encourage you to keep going when you feel like giving up. It's like whenever you don't want to do what you have to do, they're the ones that tell you to do it and keep you on track. And I love them, and I know the power of community. And so I'm glad that you know the power of community too, because that's the whole point of this podcast. It's like, build community, get through whatever you're going through together with someone else, and it's okay. If you're having mental health struggles, if you've been sexually assaulted, if you're struggling with alcohol or substance addiction, like, find your people and that'll get you through. That's why it's so heartbreaking to me whenever I see people who don't have community. And that's why I always reach out to people who don't. Like, if I'm your one person cheering you on, like, I'm going to be there cheering you on hard. Yeah. So that's, any other things you want to share? Any lessons that you've learned from sobriety that you want to share?
I would just say that where I am, like this moment today and what my life looks like, it's always full of challenges. I am not a disabled person, but I have a wheelchair strapped to my leg. Every waking moment is about my daughter's care. I worry about her going to school because she's nonverbal and she can't defend herself or tell really if someone's abusing her. And the statistics are that she's 7 times more likely to be abused as someone with an intellectual disability. And, keeping her in the home is, and she requires 24-hour care. And so the ways that Alcoholics Anonymous and the fellowship and really the steps and like really showing up for what happens here and the things that I do to destroy my own life, or the ways that I can, going forward after, okay, so you're sober. Now what? Why you acted like that. Now what? So being of service is the way that I give back to my community in AA and outside of AA. Right. So I get to show up in ways that I would never expect. For example, I've been invited to be on the board of the program, the after school program that my daughter's in. And so I collaborated a relationship between the Community Engagement Center at Pitzer and Conductability. I know. So they're, studying her program for public health purposes regarding COVID. And then I'm also in the community advisory committee through the special education local plan area. So my life has developed in a way that I show up for it, right? I show up in these outside communities that don't have anything to do with Alcoholics Anonymous in a way where I can be of service. And I bring that same sense of, how can I be helpful? And like I sponsor women that I love so much, and I love my sponsor so much. The relationship is so meaningful and deep and fun. And I've had wonderful guidance over the years. And like, why wouldn't I lean into that? It's like having an advisor, or like I'm in Africa, like I'm not going to have a guide, of course I'm going to have a guide because I can't know everything. And that has been such a relief. some of the challenges I've had over like in school was, the young people are really, like they're the top of their class, especially at the Claremont colleges, like top of their class, all these extracurriculars. I'm like, oh, I did the diversion program and I'm an AA. I barely graduated from high school. But I could keep up. I did keep up, but my head lies to me about not being good enough. That's like, I think the staple, the corroding thread is the fear, right? Self-centered fear. I'm not enough. I'm not all the things, and smart enough, and I can't do it. And I've been shown how to take one step at a time to live a really rich and full life, even though, like I said, I worry about my daughter going outside. Like those overwhelming fears, they can be so paralyzing. But I know how to do it. And I do it with those tools that I've learned over these years, which I think is so remarkable. I've been seeking my whole life. I was in quantum. I was like, I've done all kinds of things. Church, I did church. Oh my gosh. I did Bible study for years. And it always just made me feel like I'm different than these women. I'm different. And now I'm a part of, and I have people like you that we relate. And when I tell you the ways that I'm thinking, like, it doesn't make sense to anyone on the special ed board that I'm so worried about my daughter that I want to drink and I'll probably never see her again. But you understand.
Yeah, I do. And
You
you're not
do.
alone. And I love that you've, been of service to others, and you've challenged those thoughts, and you've utilized all these tools. And I think like anyone who's listening today can like take inspiration from you. I do. So if, I'm going to listen to this, I for sure feel inspired. And so thank you, for wanting to be vulnerable and share so much about yourself and your journey and how you have overcome so much and stayed sober through it all. Like, I hope to one day be celebrating my 16 years, and then, I can look back at this conversation and think like that was the beginning for me. My first person was Kelly, and she
Yay.
really got me, there. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jocelyn. Thank you for inviting me and for saying yes and showing up and being
Yeah, of course.
vulnerable.
It sounded great. It sounded great. I was like, you know what? I'm trying to be sober. I should go to this AA meeting. And I think it was helpful too that, like I said, God works in mysterious ways. And, it wasn't my first time hearing about AA. Like that seed had already been planted. And now I just knew it was the time to actually listen and act upon it. And like I told you before we started filming, but I just went to my first in-person AA meeting on Friday. And so I hope to, keep building the community, going in person, staying on Zoom, doing women's groups. And I want to, get more involved because I see the impact it has. And like some of my other friends too, who have been sober, they speak to the power of AA too. So
Right.
be sure to link Alcoholics Anonymous information in this video.
Wonderful. And then I just changed my sobriety date. I had it at 8/3/2021 the whole time. I'm like, oh, wait, I just renamed myself. I'm 2004.
Okay, 8/3/2004. And then mine was October 10th, 2020.
That's a good
So,
one.
right?
10/10/2020. I love it. What? Don't ever change it. You can never get that one back.
Exactly. And so that's the end of this podcast today. And I just thank you again for coming on.
Thank you.
Let me stop recording.